Don't smile until Christmas, or don't smile until Easter, or don't smile for 6 months, or whatever the saying is, the implication being that if you don't smile, if you are extremely serious and a dictator, authoritarian type, you'll have the students scared of you. They will respect your authority, and then only then can you start to relax and let your personality show. Otherwise, the students will walk all over you. That is terrible advice. Believe it or not, students don't give you their respect because of fear. That just doesn't work anymore. Maybe back when they had the cane and they could literally belt students, they could terrify students into submission. But these days, it's much more effective and much more practical to get to know students and build a positive relationship with them. And one of your most effective weapons in building a positive relationship is, believe it or not, a smile. In a similar way, when people say don't be friends with your students, I think that that's bad advice as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not friends with my students in the way that I'm friends with my university friends. No. But what I am is friendly with my students. We laugh, we joke, we tell each other stories, and we have a good time in class. We are friends in that regard, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think there's everything all right with that because it builds these really positive relationships, which really helps me engage students in my classes more because they actually care about me because I actually care about them. So when it comes to this advice, don't smile until whenever, take that advice, scrumple it up into a big ball of paper, Kobe, straight into the bin in the corner of your classroom because that is terrible advice. Number 2. Don't talk, just listen. Now, as a new and beginning teacher, instinctively, you probably won't want to do much talking in professional scenarios. You probably want to leave it up to the experienced teachers that you're planning on learning from. And look, that's not a bad strategy. They have so much world experience, so much life experience, so much teaching experience that you can draw from that it is a very, very, very good idea to listen to them. So the just listen part is not really the lie in this myth. It's the don't talk part that I want to address. Now, if we actually think about the classroom, what do we do when we want to engage a student with learning? Well, there's 2 main things we do. We either ask them questions to get them thinking, or we get them to ask questions themselves, right? Asking questions and answering questions are pretty much the most important fundamental part of learning. It gets your brain engaged in the learning process. You start making connections and you start, learning. For us as teachers, if we want to learn as well, we have to be actively involved in that learning process, just like a student does. So when it comes to your staff meetings, when it comes to your professional development scenarios, when it comes to your collegial engagement with other staff members, don't just let them do all the talking and listen. Actively engage within it. Ask them questions, express your opinions, say what you think needs to be done, and based on that discussion, you can definitely learn from it. You may not be right. In fact, you probably won't be. But by speaking up and having an opinion, having a voice, you will learn very quickly what you do know and what you don't know. Very early on in my career, I mostly just listened, even though in my head, I constantly had opinions. I'm a very opinionated person, as you can probably guess, based on having a YouTube channel where I share my opinions. But this didn't last very long because very quickly, maybe only 6 months in, I started sharing my opinion much more. And I found it drastically improved my knowledge of teaching. I learned a lot more about the things I knew and the things I didn't know. Believe it or not, really experienced teachers of many, many years started coming to me for help and advice because I seemed like I knew what I was talking about. And keeping in mind, I was only 6 months to a year into my teaching career at this point, and teachers with 10 plus years of experience were coming to me for advice. Now, I'm not saying that you have to start weighing into every conversation immediately, or that you have to start telling experienced teachers what to do. Not at all. All I'm saying is, if you start engaging with your colleagues in your staff meetings, in just your talks one-on-one, and you start talking rather than just listening, you're going to get a much better experience and you're going to start learning a lot more about education a lot faster, and you're going to be a better teacher for it. Well, this is a fun one. You can do all your work at school and not take anything home with you. Boy, wouldn't that be nice? We actually have to be at school for the teaching part of our job. But everything else can be done in our own time at home. Now, first things first, in your own time, that means nothing as a teacher because we get paid a salary. So essentially, all of our time outside of the actual teaching part of the classroom is our own time. So whether you spend your own time at school doing the work or at home doing the work, it's still your own time and you're still doing the work. Now, once you actually start teaching for real, you very quickly realize how much there is to being a teacher that's outside of in-class teaching. Let's talk about the things you have to do as a teacher, especially because this video is mostly targeted to new and beginning teachers. If you're yet to start or you're not that experienced, let me give you a rundown on what you can expect. Now, first of all, the reason you got into the job, the actual teaching. Yes, you've got to actually do teaching. You've got planning and preparation for your teaching. You've got all the administrative work that goes into teaching, like printing out your lesson resources, responding to those pesky emails that you get hundreds of per day. You've got to deal with parents of students, for better or for worse. They can take up a lot of time depending on your class and your students. You've got to help students in and out of class time. So outside of class time especially, a lot of students need extra support or would like extra support. In fact, as well, you've got to give detention sometimes, but then you quickly realize that you don't give detentions anymore because giving students detention is really just giving yourself detention. So you stopped doing that, but it's there. You've got lunch duties that you've got to do. You've got extracurricular activities. This is 7. You've got extracurricular activities if you sign up for any of those. I've got rugby league and the chess club. You've got marking, and that's just not summative stuff as well. You've got all your formative data captures. If you run any little quizzes, you've got to mark those and give feedback on those. Feedback, I suppose, is like 8.5, but anyway, we'll lump it in with number 8 of marking. You've got reporting, which happens at least once a term, but parents sometimes like more frequent reporting, updates on how your students are going. Probably if you're in primary school, you have to report formatively a lot more. You've got assessment, writing, and planning. Look, that's just 10 things, and there's probably a lot more, but I'm going to stop there. But the point is, there is a lot that goes into teaching that is under the surface. And let's say that you can do all that between the hours of 7 and 4, Monday to Friday, which you can't. But let's say you can. When you go home at 4 o'clock, it's not like your brain just switches off. You don't get to just ignore all of it until 7 a.m. the next morning when you rock up to school and you go, oh, that's right, I've got that class today. No, the entire time you're at home, your entire life, you're thinking about your classes. You're thinking about what that student said to you. You're wondering how you could have made that class better. You're worried about how well your students are going to do on that exam. You're wondering why your students did so badly on that exam. You're nervous about that parent phone call that's coming up. You've got those 5 deadlines for those things you had to have to your head of department 2 weeks ago that you haven't quite got to yet because you're writing those exams and you're creating those solutions for those exams and you're moderating with your colleagues and you're doing all of these different things and you're thinking about them constantly. And while you're thinking about them constantly, you're telling all these stories to your poor old partner who has to listen to you ramble on day after day after day, just like this video. And essentially, you don't get to escape it. And there is a reason why when you ask students what they do for their job, they say, I work at McDonald's, or I work at a butcher. Or if you ask adults, sometimes they say, I work at the council, or I work as a receptionist, or I work as a nurse, right? Except if you ask a teacher what they do, they say, I am a teacher, because we fully embody it, we fully absorb it into our personality, and we become that thing. There is no other alternative, and it's why so many teachers burn out, because teaching is all encompassing. When you become a teacher, you fully embody it in every aspect of your life, and you will never stop thinking about it until the day that you retire. This includes weekends, this includes before and after school, it includes holidays. You will not stop thinking about it, ways to improve it, things that you've done wrong, different students, all of these things, you'll never stop thinking about it. So the idea that you can do your job and leave it at school is a big lie. And I want you to know, if you're a new and beginning teacher, that it's not necessarily bad, it's just full on. But if you love it, like I love it, you will not work a day in your life, because the idea that if you find what you love and do it as a job, you'll not work a day in your life, That is true. Okay, with all of that said, this video is not just me complaining. I'm actually going to provide value as well. One of those things I talked about in the job of a teacher is planning for your lessons and actually writing and doing the lesson. Now, as a new and beginning teacher, typically you are more thorough in your planning for lessons, and typically you spend a lot more time preparing for lessons than experienced teachers. Mostly because they've done it before, so they don't need to do it again. If you are the kind of person who loves to plan your lessons in advance, then I highly recommend using the app Notability to do that. It's what I use to write my lessons, to plan my lessons. I've got a full tutorial or full demonstration video on how I use Notability and how you can get the most out of it to create visually appealing and engaging lessons. If you want to check that out, video's on the screen. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one. Regardless, you're going to have different strategies for those really different strategy for those really homogeneous types of groups to those heterogeneous types of groups. That's way too fancy of a word for this kind of video.